Newcastle in their pursuit of AC Milan midfielder Sandro Tonali. Mark, I'm going to come to you first because a lot of Newcastle fans getting very excited about this deal. I think we've seen pictures of representatives in Milan. How close is this to getting over the line, do you think?
Close, but not completed just yet. We know that there's been dialogue between AC Milan and Newcastle over the last 48 hours as things have intensified with regards to their pursuit of Sandro Tonali. I know Newcastle fans are desperate for us to say this is deal agreed, but we're not quite at that stage yet. They're just in the final throes of the intricate details of this contract because it's a huge deal, isn't it, for both Newcastle and AC Milan. They're losing probably their prized asset, their key man, their main midfielder and one of the best standout players in Serie A last season. And it's going to be, as you said at the top of the show, a package worth £55 million. So it's a significant outlay for Newcastle as well when they're right up against FFP. But yeah, this is a deal that is getting close. He's captaining the Italy under-21s tonight against Romania. So Sandro Tonali, Newcastle fans, if you can find the game somewhere, you get the opportunity to watch your new man. And I think that gives you an indication as to the type of character he is. The fact that he's a captain for Italy under-21s, he's played for the senior side as well, shows you just what type of a player that Eddie Howe and Newcastle are so close to getting. Of course, as soon as we know, we'll let you know. But yeah, we're just waiting to get confirmation on this one. We know that Dan Ashworth and his team are currently in Milan trying to thrash out the finer details of that deal. We know that we've seen pictures of them coming in and out of various buildings as well. So it's just a case of waiting for official confirmation now. You can see there one of his backroom team and Dan Ashworth has spotted as well coming out of that same hotel with the agent of Sandro Tonali. And I can only describe this as a massive coup for Newcastle and a huge deal, and what a player they're getting.
What does that mean then for Newcastle in their pursuit of James Maddison? Is Tonali very much their priority right now?
Well, Newcastle remain interested in signing Maddison, but doing a deal for him may prove problematic if indeed they do close out that deal with Sandro Tonali, which we expect to take place soon. Leicester City, we're told, demanding around £50 million for James Maddison, and currently Newcastle couldn't buy Tonali and Maddison because of what Mark was saying before when it comes to financial fair play guidelines with what Maddison and his asking price is at the moment. So currently Newcastle are out of contention, but they've not ruled themselves out completely. This could change based on two factors. A, Leicester drastically reducing their asking price for James Maddison. That could happen. We're only in June. When it comes to the end of August and Maddison hasn't been sold yet, then that asking fee of £50 million could come down somewhat. Another way that Newcastle could finance the deal is if Eddie Howe lets go a couple of players, so they could afford something close to £50 million. Maddison, 1 year left on his contract. One thing this does mean, with Tonali potentially moving to Newcastle, Spurs move into the box seat. However, there is a distance in the valuation that Leicester have of him, around £50 million at least, and what Spurs are willing to pay at this moment in time. There's
so many intricacies with regards to the James Maddison deal, because what you've seen from Daniel Levy and Tottenham is they won't overpay for a player. So if Leicester City say we want 50 rising to £60 million, you can rest assured that Daniel Levy won't want to pay the asking price. He want to get a good deal. That's something he's historically always done. The other problem is, of course, wages, because James Maddison is on big wages at Leicester City. He was part of that group that were very well paid off the back of winning the Premier League, and the club was trying to go in and mix it with the big boys, and that meant paying big wages as well. And the other thing to bear in mind is that Newcastle had 2 rejected offers for James Maddison back in January. There was an initial offer that was knocked back by Leicester. The second offer was knocked back by Leicester. So whilst there is interest, it doesn't necessarily mean that Newcastle will continue that pursuit. I think they're interested, but only at the right price.
We've talked about a lot of midfielders and Newcastle, Mark. If they're not going to get Maddison, it would imply that there is still a bit of cash to spend even after the Tonali deal. So do they have other targets, other areas of the pitch?
They have other targets. There are other players that Eddie Howe would love to bring to the football club. He's mentioned it, I think, in every single press conference at the back end of the campaign. One of the big factors with regards to Newcastle over the course of this summer is FFP. Now, Eddie Howe has created a Champions League side from a team that was virtually about to get relegated. So therefore, the club has to catch up commercially. So eyes really are now on Dan Ashworth and the commercial department, because Dan has got to be clever with the finances. They've got to work within the boundaries of FFP, and the commercial team have got to try and drive revenue into that football club, because the more money they make, the more sponsorship deals they do, the more opportunity that Eddie Howe will have to strengthen the side. But you have to have that money coming in before you can start spending it. They are right up against it with regards to FFP. Eddie has mentioned that on so many occasions, so they are going to have to be creative. I don't think they'll be the big players that people expect in the window. They will quietly go about their business. You look at the recruitment that they've done since Eddie went into the football club. They haven't signed the big blockbuster names. They did with Bruno Guimaraes or Ishak, but you look at some of the other players that they've got in, Kieran Trippier, Dan Burn, Matt Targett. These are players that have just slipped under the radar and been hugely effective. But when you look at Newcastle, right back potentially could be an area they'd look to strengthen, possibly left back as well, maybe in the middle of defence, possibly in an advanced position. So Eddie Howe will probably have a shopping list that's that big, and it will get squeezed like that by the sporting director, Dan Ashworth.
The exciting one seems to be Tonali then, and it seems from the outside this is a real statement signing, as Mark was alluding to earlier.
It is. Newcastle have made some brilliant signings in recent time. Bruno Guimaraes is one you take from the top calibre, but this is now Newcastle dining at the top table, signing players from the very top clubs. We've not seen this before for Newcastle since maybe signing Michael Owen from Real Madrid back in 2005. He really fits the bill for Newcastle. In January, we spoke about how a priority for them was getting a holding midfielder. They had a number of different players in midfield, but it meant that Bruno Guimaraes was having to play in his holding role. He's much better playing further forward. He filled the role admirably in his time this season. Newcastle finishing in the Champions League spots. But Tonali is a man that I think is seen as more a priority for them than getting an attacking midfielder like James Maddison. They have other players in that position. They only signed Anthony Gordon for around £40 million in January. So they've already got that area well serviced. This is somebody they needed, especially with John Joe Shelby leaving last season. It's a gap in the squad they've now filled. But as Mark was saying there's plenty of areas they need to strengthen because now they're playing midweek in the Champions League as well as fighting in the top four in the Premier League.